paradrama tales.
At our family Christmas dinner, I was told, "You can eat in the car." My brother smirked. "Why waste a seat on you?" I still held my carefully wrapped gift. Then I whispered, "Check under your plate." What would you do next? I stepped into the dining room clutching my gift, the scent of pine and roasting turkey mingling with the hum of my family's laughter. But the warmth I expected vanished the moment I walked through the door. My brother Jacob looked up from his seat, that smug half-smile twisting his lips as he leaned back and said, "You can eat in the car. Why waste a seat on you?" The words landed like ice water, and laughter rippled around the table, quiet, cruel little waves that lapped at my confidence. I swallowed hard, glanced at my mother's downturned eyes, and at Dad's finger tapping against his wine glass, his gaze fixed on his phone as if I were suddenly invisible. My cousins chattered about Christmas miracles, their voices soft, but excluding me, and there beside their plates of mashed potatoes and cranberry-glazed ham sat my cousin Mark, the one who once stole my birthday present, happily digging in. I stood rooted, the beautifully wrapped box of thoughtful gifts for each of them, heavy in my hand. The overhead lights felt harsh, spotlighting my isolation. I forced a tight nod before addressing Jacob again. "Check under your plate." His smirk flickered as he reached beneath his china, his fingers brushing against the taped envelope. He pulled it free and paused, frowning as he peeled it open. I watched the color drain from his face as his eyes darted from the note to me. I didn't need to hear him read the words. I knew they were confirmations of every dollar I'd spent covering his bills, each receipt laid bare. My gift of generosity, now exposed as the extent of his entitlement. "Explain that to everyone," I said softly, turning on my heel. A gasp fluttered through the table, but no one chased after me. Instead, I felt the weight of their shock and, strangely, a spark of triumph warmed my chest. I collected my coat, silent tears pricking the back of my eyes, and walked out, the carols faint behind me. As the door clicked shut, my phone buzzed wildly. Mom, Dad, Jacob, even Kelly texting. But I let it ring. I sank into the driver's seat, the leather cold under my fingers, and inhaled deep, tasting relief mixed with heartbreak. They had shamed me, told me I didn't belong, but now the truth of my sacrifices lay open for them to swallow. I started the engine, the Christmas lights of the street blurring through my windshield, and drove away from their judgment, their laughter, their silence. In the rearview mirror, I saw the glow of their front porch fade, and a fierce clarity took hold. This night of shame would be the turning point where I finally stopped giving them my worth on a platter, and instead took back my dignity, 1 mile at a time. I watched Jacob's smug grin falter the moment his trembling fingers brushed against the taped envelope beneath his glossy dinner plate, the soft crack of its seal echoing louder than any raised voices in that silent dining room. He pulled free the crisp white paper and unfolded it with a slow, almost reverent caution, as if afraid the truth it bore might scorch his skin. In that instant, time slowed. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the soft click of my own heartbeat, and the strained clearing of Dad's throat as every eye swung toward Jacob's plate. His brow furrowed as he scanned the typed list of figures: household rent contributions, monthly utility transfers, daycare payments for his 2 children, the thousands spent on birthday gifts and summer camp tuition, even the roof repair check I'd written on a cold January morning. And then the mounting totals. Tens of thousands of dollars he had accepted without so much as a thank you. I felt the heat of years of swallowing gratitude, of late-night budget spreadsheets and skipped lunches, rise up in my chest as I stood behind him, every breath a silent witness to the ledger of my sacrifices. Jacob's hand shook as he passed the note, his eyes meeting my calm gaze for the first time that night, the flicker of entitlement giving way to something raw: shock, guilt, fear. My mother leaned forward, her face paling as she glimpsed the bolded final balance at the bottom, the exact amount I had poured into his life, while mine quietly drained away. A collective gasp rippled around the table, like a wave crashing against the hull of our so-called family unity. Even Mark, the cousin who once swiped my wallet at a barbecue, stared in stunned recognition of the injustice leveled bare. I cleared my throat softly, the sound a gentle hammer striking the room's thick walls of indifference. "I thought family meant we lift each other up," I said, my voice low, but carrying into every corner of that space. "But I've carried this family on my back long enough." The note fluttered to the table as Jacob's head dropped, his shoulders curling inward under the weight of every dollar unreturned and every kindness unreciprocated. My father's phone clattered to the floor, forgotten, and my mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears glinting in her eyes. The roasted turkey's aroma, once comforting, now felt like an insult to my wounded pride. I could see in Dad's retreating posture that he finally understood. The safety net I had been was frayed and torn, and stepping away was the only way to force him, and them all, to see its value. In that charged hush, I realized the envelope was more than a tally of expenses. It was a mirror held up to their conscience, a reckoning they had no choice but to face. And as Jacob swallowed hard, the ledger cleared away the final crumbs of my doubts. I wasn't the fool for giving. I was the wise one for knowing when to demand justice. The moment stretched, fragile and profound, before I turned and walked out, leaving the envelope on the table like a dropped gauntlet, a challenge they could either pick up, make amends, and earn back my trust, or let lie there as proof of everything they had lost. I slammed the car door shut behind me, as if sealing off every last ounce of that suffocating dining room, the envelope still lying on the table like an unspoken verdict. My heart hammered in my ears as I fumbled for the ignition, hands shaking so violently I nearly stalled before the engine roared to life. Headlights carved bright tunnels into the winter night, illuminating the crust of frozen leaves skirting the curb, while in the rearview mirror I watched the windows of my childhood home grow distant, their golden glow swallowed by the inky black. The tires hummed against the asphalt as I pulled onto the highway, each mile marker slipping past like a countdown to freedom. In the passenger seat, abandoned gifts rattled softly in their bags, a hollow clatter that echoed my own hollowed-out certainty, and I realized that I was leaving far more than a driveway behind. I was leaving years of unreciprocated sacrifice, of silent resentment buried beneath polite smiles and holiday facades. The windshield fogged with my breath as memories flickered like passing street lamps. Luke's delighted laughter when I paid his daycare fees, Mom's relieved sigh as the mortgage payment cleared, Dad's nod of gratitude that I'd never asked for, and yet none of it had been enough to buy me a seat at the table, a word of thanks, or a single shred of respect. So I drove, letting the road erase those worn-out chapters, the speedometer climbing as I shed the weight in my chest with every acceleration. Radio stations bled into one another, the static-laced ballads and late-night DJ patter, offering no comfort, only accentuating the cavernous silence I'd sought, but wasn't sure I could fill. My phone lay face down on the console, its screen dark after countless unanswered calls. I imagined the frantic digits piling up in my absence, but I resisted the urge to look. This was my reckoning, my exodus, and I needed the darkness to think, really think, about who I'd been and who I could become now that I'd stepped out of the shadows of obligation. Past the city limits, the trees closed in, skeletal branches arching overhead like silent sentinels, bearing witness to my nervous liberation. A single tear slid down my cheek, warm against the chill, and I wiped it away with the back of my sleeve, surprised at how good it felt to let something go. Ahead, a lone convenience store glowed under a flickering neon sign. I pulled in, the engine settling to a quiet idle. Stepping out into the cold, I let the wind whip around me, the crisp air a bracing reminder that the world was still vast, still full of possibility. I leaned against the hood, eyes tracing the constellation of my hometown streetlights, each one a memory I no longer had to carry. In that moment, the night ceased to be an abyss and became instead a canvas, blank, infinite, waiting for the strokes of my own design. I slipped back inside, restarted the car, and drove on, the finality of my departure propelling me forward into whatever darkness lay ahead, knowing at last that the only light I truly needed was the one I carried within. Ever since I graduated college with that shiny diploma clutched in my trembling hands, I slipped into the role of the silent provider, a behind-the-scenes lifeline whose sacrifices no one remarked upon, covering my brother Jacob's $1,200 a month rent when he lost his job, fronting his daycare bills of $200 per week for my niece and nephew, so their mother could work part-time, slipping my parents extra cash to quiet the mounting tension over unpaid utilities, all while I scrimped and saved, skipping birthday dinners that cost $50 apiece, surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and secondhand textbooks. Year after year, I watched my 401k contributions creep up by a few percentage points, diverting bonuses I earned from my steady IT job into family emergencies, patching roof leaks with that $10,000 insurance payout I thought was for me, paying for my sister-in-law's dental surgery last spring, at a clinic that cost her husband $2,500 because his benefits didn't cover root canals. And still, no one said thank you. No one asked if I'd eaten. Only Jacob's smirk and my mother's averted eyes, as if all that constant generosity was an obligation I had volunteered for, simply by being born into this clan. I remember nights hunched over kitchen counters, calculator in hand, to make sure I could cover another utility bill payment of $150 before rent of $1,000 was due next week, plotting spreadsheet scenarios of how many extra Uber shifts I'd have to work, cutting out vacations with friends so I could keep being the family safety net, swallowing the quiet burn in my chest every time I heard Jacob brag to his buddies about having a safety cushion who covered his mistakes. I remember the birthdays I spent assembling gifts I bought on layaway, wrapping them in festive paper, while tears of exhaustion blurred my vision, because I wanted them to feel loved, never imagining that love would be taken for granted, stacked like firewood, and ignored until it ran out. I recall the night I paid for both kids' summer camp at $300 a week, so their single mother could finish her degree, believing I was helping someone build a future, only to realize later that I'd been propping up a life that never included me, because they never invited me to the graduation when she finally walked the stage. No text, no photo, no word of appreciation. And when my car's check engine light blinked ominously, I paid the $600 repair bill without complaint, seeing it as another line item in the ledger of what family meant. Until the ledger tipped and I discovered I was merely the wallet, not a son, a brother, or a man deserving of kindness in return. So as the highway stretched out in front of me, that frigid night after Christmas dinner, the glow of taillights fading in my rearview mirror, all those silent sacrifices from every busted paycheck and every sleepless night crystallized into one simple truth. Generosity without respect is exploitation, and it was time to reclaim the pieces of myself I had unwittingly given away, dollar by dollar, meal by meal, year after year. When I pulled back into the driveway that frosty night, my heart hammered like a war drum, and I knew I wasn't finished, not until every question had an answer. I stormed up the path, the Christmas lights flickering overhead like silent witnesses, and rapped my fist against the red door until it rattled in its frame. Mom cracked it open first, her cheeks streaked with tears and disbelief, while Dad hovered behind her, arms folded, eyes burning with a mixture of guilt and anger. Before they could speak, I shoved past them into the narrow entryway, my shoulders squared and breath coming in ragged pulls. "Explain it," I demanded, my voice echoing off the coat rack and muddy boots by the door. Jacob materialized at the top of the stairs, leaning against the banister with that same smug smirk, but it didn't hold when he saw the fire in my eyes. "This ends tonight," I said, stepping forward so Dad had nowhere to retreat. "How did I go from being the son you praised to the punchline you laughed at?" The floorboards creaked under our shifting weight as Mom opened her mouth, but no words came, just a tremor of silence that stretched too long. Jacob rolled his shoulders as if settling into a performance. "It was a joke," he said, voice too loud, too certain. "Just a little holiday humor." I closed the distance between us in 2 strides, the air crackling with cold resentment. "A joke," I repeated, voice low and dangerous. "Like how I was the one you called for rent, for groceries, for every emergency expense, an extra $500 for daycare, another $1,200 to keep your lights on, $10,000 for that roof last summer, and you treated me like I was expendable the moment I refused to be your ATM?" Dad shifted uneasily, his phone slipping from his grip as he tried to avert his gaze. "Jacob," he mumbled, "calm down." But I wouldn't. "Calm down?" I laughed, the sound jagged and bitter. "I've been calm for years while you drained my bank account. Now it's my turn to demand calm answers." My outstretched hand held Jacob's bank statement dossier, the thick stack of printouts that proved every secret gamble, every hidden withdrawal he'd made from the joint account I thought was for daycare. The documents trembled in my grip as I slapped them onto the hall table, papers fanning out like tarot cards of betrayal. Jacob's face drained of color, the smirk dissolving into panic. "You can't," he began, but I cut him off. "I can. I did. And I'm taking back every cent you stole." Mom tried to step between us, her voice cracking. "Sweetheart, please." But I shook her off gently, as if she were a child, because she hadn't seen the years I'd spent counting pennies so they could spend freely. "No more." I looked Dad in the eye, and for the first time, he seemed smaller than I'd ever remembered, a man trapped by his own silence. "You taught me to believe in family," I said softly. "But you never taught me that love doesn't cost a bank account." The room was so silent I could hear the family portraits on the wall creak in the draft. And in that breathless moment, I realized this confrontation wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my dignity. With my chin high and my chest aching, I turned on my heel and walked back through the doorway into the cold night, leaving the door swinging open on its hinges, a quiet testament to the family I was leaving behind, and the man I was finally becoming. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the single overhead bulb casting drab light over the thick stack of bank statements, receipts, and spreadsheets I had spent the last 2 days. Assembling. My hands trembled, equal parts exhaustion and resolve, yet I felt sharper than I had in years. Each line item told the story they had tried to hide. $5,200 in daycare payments, $3,600 in utilities, $7,800 covering rent when their account ran dry, another $4,500 to patch the leaky roof, and countless smaller transfers, grocery runs, medical bills, birthday gifts, that added up to a staggering $42,500. I grabbed my phone and dialed my lawyer, giving him the numbers and asking him to draft a formal demand. Repay the full amount within 14 days or face legal action for breach of trust and unjust enrichment. As I hung up, I felt the tension in my shoulders release, replaced by a hard-edged clarity. 2 hours later, the envelope lay on their front porch, tape peeling at the edges, the bold red "demand for payment" visible through the window. I waited in my car 10 feet away, engine silent, breath fogging the windshield. Inside, I pictured my father's eyes narrowing, my mother's shoulders sagging, Jacob's smug grin evaporating into panic. When they finally stepped outside, Mom cradled the envelope like a Christmas gift that had turned to coal. Dad's voice rattled as he asked what this was about, and Jacob tried to snatch it from Mom's hands, mouth opening to protest. Instead, she held it away, her face pale. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching gravel, and crossed the lawn with purpose. "Read it," I said without preamble, "then decide whether you want to settle this quietly." Their silence was accusatory and deafening. Jacob's hands shook as he tore the flap. Dad stared at the typed total. Mom blinked back tears. I didn't linger for excuses. "This isn't a threat," I continued softly, but with iron in my voice. "It's a boundary. I spent years believing family meant sacrifice. I sacrificed everything for you, and this is the accounting." I watched a single tear roll down Mom's cheek as she scanned the itemized charges. The wind whipped the pages, mocking their unraveling lies. "You have 2 weeks," I said, "to return every cent, or I file suit." Then I turned and walked back to my car, not looking back. In the days that followed, the phone calls started. A flurry of apologies, promises to gather funds, pleas for an extra few days. But I waited for the bank alert before I responded. Each payment notification felt like a nail driven in the coffin of the old family dynamic. By the 13th day, the account was whole again, $42,500 restored. I sat at the same kitchen table where I had built that ledger and allowed myself a slow exhale. There was no triumphant fanfare, only a silent moment of peace, knowing I had reclaimed more than money. I had reclaimed my worth. When the final payment cleared, I sent a short text to each of them. "Account settled. I hope this brings you the reflection you need." And then I deleted their numbers. Financial justice had been served, but the true victory was feeling my own balance restored. That afternoon, after the final transfers hit my account, an eerie stillness settled over our family's world, and over mine. I watched from my kitchen window as Dad's car sat idling in the driveway for nearly an hour before he finally climbed out, shoulders hunched, eyes staring at the ground. He lingered at the front door, hands twisting in his coat pockets, as if gathering courage to knock, and then he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked slowly back to the car, leaving the house behind him. Next came Mom, her teary voicemail apologies growing more frantic each hour, but I never answered. I couldn't bear the tremor in her voice. Jacob called too, fewer times as the days passed, each message alternately laced with regret, anger, and pleading, yet never a real apology, only demands for reinstatement of family bonds. I let them go to voicemail, then deleted them. Kelly texted me once to say she and the kids understood. She was arranging a small holiday for them elsewhere, hoping I might one day forgive. My heart ached for her, but I still could not forgive the world that had taught me my generosity was exploitation. Word spread quickly through my aunts and uncles. I had ruined Christmas, bailed them out, only to turn on them. At work, colleagues noticed I'd stopped taking calls during lunch and had started making plans that never involved the usual family gatherings. Rumors fluttered. Some said I'd lost my mind. Others suggested I'd been greedy. My inbox filled with awkward messages from distant relatives. "We love you, but this has gone too far." It was as if I'd been erased from their circle, replaced by a cautionary tale. In the days that followed, solitude became my only companion. I found solace in small routines: morning coffee on the balcony as dawn broke pink over the rooftops, long walks through the neighborhood under silent streetlights, evenings spent cooking for one and savoring every bite. In those quiet moments, I felt the fractures stretching between me and my birth, family, the chasm yawning wider with every unanswered call. Yet I also felt something else, a fierce relief, as though I had finally stopped bleeding for people who would never value my worth. One evening, 2 weeks after the ultimatum, our mutual neighbor, Uncle Rob, dropped by, bearing a pie and genuine concern. He knocked gently, then stepped inside, his eyes full of sadness and support. We sat in my living room for hours, talking not about the money, but about the years I had poured myself into others until there was nothing left. He told me I had done the right thing, that sometimes love meant enforcing boundaries, not eroding them. As he left, I realized that while some relationships would never heal, others, like the one I was building with Rob and Kelly, had grown stronger in the fallout. The holidays passed without their carols or family photo ops. Instead, I celebrated with friends who knew my story and respected my choice. In every laugh and shared dish, I tasted the possibility of new traditions born from honesty rather than expectation. Yes, the fractures remained, deep, jagged lines in the foundation of my childhood home. But in those cracks, sunlight filtered through, promising that this painful season of division might one day yield the quiet bloom of self-respect and authentic connection. That first Christmas without my family's invitation felt like walking through a winter storm alone, but it turned into the beginning of something unexpected. A few nights after Uncle Rob's visit, I found a text from Kelly. "Would you come over tomorrow? I've got the kids and need an extra pair of hands with dinner." I hesitated. Old habits die hard. But then I realized this was different. No expectation of endless generosity, no undercurrent of family debt, just neighbors seeking support. When I arrived at Kelly's home, her 2 little ones dashed to my arms, yelping, "Uncle!" Their laughter cut right through any lingering guilt. Kelly greeted me at the door with a genuine smile. "I ordered pizza, but I thought I'd put you to work setting the table." And suddenly, I was back in the rhythm of kindness, this time balanced, reciprocal, and warm. Over dinner, we traded stories of our family's chaos and the freedom we found in breaking away. Kelly confided how liberating it felt to make choices for her children without her husband's approval, a right I'd fought for myself. And I realized our shared resilience created a bond stronger than any inherited duty. In the weeks that followed, I met other friends who had quietly witnessed my family's drama and reached out. Martha from my yoga class invited me to join her weekly meditation group, insisting, "This is your time to fill your own cup." Each Thursday evening, we'd gather in her living room, soft mats on the carpet, candles flickering. No one asked for money, no one judged my past. They simply offered presence and understanding. I found myself opening up about the long nights spent wondering if I'd done the right thing, and hearing stories of others who had set boundaries with aging parents or demanding siblings. Their empathy felt like a salve on old wounds. One chilly Saturday morning, Uncle Rob and I climbed into his pickup and drove to the community center where he volunteered helping seniors learn basic computer skills. Rob introduced me to Ms. Jenkins, an 82-year-old widow, teaching me how to use Zoom so she could speak to her grandchildren overseas. As I guided her through screen shares and virtual backgrounds, I felt something shift. My identity had long been tied to what I gave my birth family. Now, I discovered joy in offering my skills to strangers who truly appreciated them. Meanwhile, my own home began to transform. I invited Kelly and her children to paint a mural on the blank wall of my kitchen, bright sunflowers and rolling hills that reminded me of summer road trips with Uncle Rob. I painted alongside them, our laughter echoing against fresh coats of yellow and green. The mural wasn't just art, it was a declaration. My life was no longer defined by old family roles, but by new alliances I chose. By New Year's Eve, I hosted a small gathering of these newfound friends, Kelly's family, yoga classmates, Ms. Jenkins with her laptop propped on the coffee table, and Uncle Rob, who arrived bearing his famous apple pie. The table overflowed with dishes we'd each contributed, and the chatter hummed with stories of cooking failures, shared hopes, and plans for the year ahead. When the clock struck midnight, no one sneered, no one demanded, no one left someone eating in the car. Instead, we hugged, toasted to fresh starts, and watched fireworks painting the sky with promise. That night, I realized, family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up for you, who respect your worth, and who help you build a life rooted in mutual care. In their faces, I saw my own reflection, not the worn-out walking wallet of my past, but someone strong enough to choose kindness on her own terms and wise enough to surround herself with allies who lift her up. My old world had fractured, but in its place, I found a community that welcomed me to the table, always with an open seat and an open heart. That late-night gathering by candlelight, surrounded by friends who chose me, not by duty but by genuine care, felt like the first breath of a new life. I realized then that the ache I carried for years, the weight of unspoken hurt and unreturned kindness, was finally lifting. In the faces of Kelly's children, cheering as they dipped their paintbrushes in bright sunflower yellow. In Ms. Jenkins' triumphant smile the first time she mastered Zoom. In Uncle Rob's warm pat on the back as he handed me a slice of his homemade apple pie. I saw the true circle of family. Not blood alone, but the people who stand by you when you set boundaries and reclaim your value. I remember stepping onto my balcony that dawn after Jacob's final payment cleared. $42,500 returned, every last penny of the sacrifices I'd made. Instead of feeling empty, my chest swelled with relief and pride. I'd learned that love isn't giving until you have nothing left. It's giving from a whole heart, freely, and stopping when the giving destroys rather than sustains you. It's teaching others how to stand on their own 2 feet, rather than forever leaning on yours. Since then, life has blossomed in unexpected ways. I've taught cooking classes at the community center, turning my childhood love of Sunday roasts into a way to bring neighbors together. I've sketched again, my freelance illustrations now including portraits of the very friends who saved me from silence. On quiet mornings, I sip coffee on that same balcony, watching birds dance among the maple blossoms, knowing my peace was hard-won and richly deserved. If there's one lesson I hope you take from my journey, it's this. Your worth isn't measured by how much you give away, but by how firmly you stand up for yourself when giving no longer feels like love. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the bravest act of self-respect there is. So, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to reclaim your own value by saying no? How did you find the courage to step away from a situation that no longer served you? Let's start a conversation that reminds every viewer, young or old, that it's never too late to redraw the circles of family and friendship around those who truly belong there. If you found strength in this story, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another tale of resilience, respect, and rebirth. From my heart to yours, thank you for being part of this journey and for helping me build a table where everyone has a seat.